I never thought I'd be the kind of person sitting in a courtroom fighting for my own child's identity. But there I was, watching my ex-boyfriend, Marcus Rivera, squirm in his expensive suit while his mother, Elena, sat behind him like a queen holding court. For 3 years, they had called me a liar. For 3 years, they had looked at my beautiful daughter, Lily, and treated her like she was some kind of mistake, like I was trying to pin her on their perfect family. Elena had spent countless hours telling anyone who would listen that I was just another desperate woman trying to trap her successful son, and Marcus had played along with every single lie. The courtroom felt cold and sterile, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I wore my cheap department store dress, the nicest thing I owned, while Elena wore something that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Marcus wouldn't even look at me. He just kept checking his phone and whispering to his high-powered lawyer, David Kim, who had been treating this entire case like I was some annoying problem that needed to be swept under the rug. Judge Harrison had been methodical all morning, going through the evidence piece by piece. I thought I knew exactly how this was going to end. The DNA test results were sitting right there in a manila envelope, and I knew what they would show because I had never lied about anything. Marcus was Lily's father, and after today, he would finally have to face the truth he'd been running from for 3 years. But then Judge Harrison did something that made my blood run cold. He looked up from his papers with an expression I couldn't quite read and said, "Before we review the DNA results, there's one more piece of evidence that needs to be addressed. We have a text message from the defendant's phone, sent at 2:47 a.m. on the night in question." I watched Marcus go completely white. Not pale, not nervous, actually white, like all the blood had drained from his face. His lawyer shot up from his chair, stammering about needing time to review additional evidence, practically begging for a recess like his client's life depended on it. Elena's confident smirk vanished, replaced by confusion and what looked like the very first hint of fear I had ever seen in her eyes. That was when I realized this DNA hearing was about to expose something much bigger than just paternity. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about that night 3 years ago. Something that would finally prove I had been telling the truth all along. 3 years ago, I thought I had met someone who could actually see a future with me. Marcus Rivera wasn't just handsome in that effortless way some men are. He was ambitious, charming, and when he looked at you, he made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We met at a coffee shop downtown, where I was studying for my nursing prerequisites between shifts at Romano's restaurant. He was there with his laptop, working on some real estate deal, and when he overheard me counting change for my order and offered to buy my coffee, I actually said yes. For 2 months, it felt like something out of a movie. Marcus would pick me up after my restaurant shifts, even the late ones, and we'd drive around the city talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his plans to expand his family's real estate business, and I shared my dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse. He seemed genuinely interested in my goals, asking about my classes and encouraging me when I doubted whether I could handle the workload while working full-time. Then I met his mother. Elena Rivera was the kind of woman who sized you up in the first 30 seconds and decided whether you were worth her time. When Marcus brought me to Sunday dinner at their sprawling house in the hills, she greeted me with a smile that never reached her eyes. Throughout the meal, she asked pointed questions about my family, my job, my education, all while making it clear that nothing I said impressed her. She kept referring to Marcus's ex-girlfriend, Stephanie, who apparently came from the right kind of family and had gone to law school. Marcus has always been so generous with his time, Elena said, cutting into her perfectly prepared salmon. Sometimes too generous with people who might not understand his position in the community. Marcus laughed it off and changed the subject, but I heard the message loud and clear. I wasn't good enough for her son, and she wanted me to know it. Things started changing after that dinner. Marcus became harder to reach, canceling dates at the last minute and making excuses about work or family obligations. When I tried to talk to him about it, he assured me his mother just needed time to warm up to me, that she was protective because of bad experiences with women in the past. I wanted to believe him. I was falling in love, and when someone makes you feel special, you convince yourself the problems will work themselves out. Then came the night that changed everything. Marcus showed up at my apartment after 2 a.m., clearly upset about something he wouldn't explain. He just said he needed to be somewhere that felt real, somewhere away from all the expectations and pressure. We talked until sunrise, and for the first time in weeks, he felt like the man I had fallen for. He told me he loved me. He said he wanted to figure out how to make things work, despite his mother's disapproval. 6 weeks later, I was staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. When I told Marcus, his initial reaction was everything I had hoped for. He held me, told me we would figure it out together, and even started talking about names and nursery colors. For a brief moment, I let myself believe that things might actually be okay. But when he told Elena, everything fell apart. She demanded he get a paternity test, accused me of deliberately getting pregnant to trap him, and threatened to cut him off financially if he didn't handle the situation responsibly. Marcus started pulling away again, but this time it was different. He became cold and distant, questioning things he had never questioned before. Elena called him constantly, filling his head with doubts and suspicions. She began telling people in their social circle that I was some gold digger who had targeted her son, painting me as a manipulative woman trying to ruin his bright future. By the time Lily was born, Marcus had completely withdrawn. He showed up at the hospital, held his daughter for about 10 minutes, and then left. Elena never came at all. For the next 3 years, I raised Lily on my own, working double shifts at the restaurant and picking up bookkeeping work whenever I could find it. Every month was a struggle, making rent, buying groceries, and affording childcare so I could work. Marcus would occasionally send money, usually around holidays or Lily's birthday, but always with the condition that I never contact him directly. Everything went through lawyers or mutual friends. Elena made sure everyone knew she didn't consider Lily her grandchild, telling people there were questions about paternity that needed to be resolved. The breaking point came 6 months ago when Lily started asking why she didn't have a daddy like the other kids at daycare. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that her father is too much of a coward to claim her? That his mother would rather pretend she doesn't exist than admit her son made a mistake? That was when I decided to file for paternity and child support, not because I wanted Marcus back in our lives, but because Lily deserved to know the truth about who she was. And I deserved to stop carrying this burden alone. The morning of the DNA hearing, I woke up at 5 a.m. with my stomach in knots. I had been preparing for this day for 8 months, but nothing could have prepared me for the weight of walking into that courthouse, knowing my daughter's entire future hung in the balance. I dropped Lily off at my neighbor Mrs. Patterson's house, kissed her goodbye, and promised I'd be back soon with good news. She looked at me with those big brown eyes, exactly like mine, and asked, "Are you going to see my daddy today, Mommy?" I couldn't bring myself to answer. The family courthouse was intimidating in that way government buildings always are. Marble floors, echoing hallways, and people in expensive suits walking around like they owned the place. I wore my navy blue dress, the one I had bought specifically for job interviews, and carried my purse with the broken zipper because it was the only one big enough to hold all my documents. My lawyer, Janet Rodriguez, met me at the security checkpoint. She was a public defender who had taken my case pro bono, and while I was grateful, I knew she was overworked and didn't have the resources to compete with Marcus's legal team. When I walked into the courtroom, Marcus was already there with his mother and David Kim. Elena was dressed like she was attending a charity gala, not a paternity hearing, wearing a cream-colored suit that screamed money and a string of pearls that probably cost more than my car. She looked at me like I was something unpleasant she'd stepped in, then leaned over to whisper something to Marcus that made him nod grimly. Marcus himself looked confident, almost cocky, wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly. He had a fresh haircut and looked every inch the successful businessman his mother always bragged about. When our eyes met for just a second, he looked away immediately, like acknowledging my existence might contaminate him somehow. It struck me how different he looked from the man who had shown up at my apartment 3 years ago, vulnerable and seeking comfort. This version of Marcus was polished, cold, and completely foreign to me. The hearing began with Judge Harrison explaining the procedures, and then Elena was called to testify first. She walked to the witness stand like she was stepping onto a red carpet, head held high, voice clear and authoritative as she was sworn in. David Kim led her through a series of questions designed to paint me as an opportunistic liar who had targeted her innocent son. Mrs. Rivera, what is your opinion of the plaintiff's claims regarding your son? David asked, his voice smooth and practiced. Elena turned toward me with pure disdain. Your Honor, we demand absolute proof that this child is connected to our family. My son has worked incredibly hard to build his reputation and his business, and we will not allow false accusations to destroy what he has accomplished. That child isn't our blood, and we refuse to be manipulated by someone who clearly saw an opportunity to take advantage of my son's generous nature. Her words hit me like physical blows. She spoke about Lily like she was a burden, a mistake that needed correcting, not a beautiful little girl who deserved to know her father. I watched the judge carefully, but his expression stayed neutral as he took notes and nodded occasionally. Then Marcus took the stand, and this was the moment I had been dreading most. David Kim walked him through his version of events, painting our relationship as casual and brief. Nothing more than a few dates that meant nothing serious to either of us. Mr. Rivera, the plaintiff claims conception occurred on March 15, 2022. Can you tell the court about your whereabouts that evening? Marcus looked directly at the judge, his voice steady and convincing. Your Honor, I was not with Sarah that night. I wasn't even in town. I had driven to Sacramento for a real estate conference that weekend, and I have documentation to prove it. I never slept with her that night she claims conception happened. And frankly, I'm not even certain about the other times we were together. Our relationship was very casual, and I think she may have misunderstood the nature of what we had. David Kim then presented hotel receipts and conference materials, building a case that Marcus couldn't possibly be Lily's father because he wasn't even in the same city when I claimed conception occurred. As the evidence piled up, I felt my confidence starting to crumble. Elena was smirking now, whispering to the people sitting behind her, probably friends from her country club who had come to watch me be humiliated. Marcus looked relieved, like he was finally going to be free of this burden that had been hanging over his head. For the first time in 3 years, I started doubting myself. Had I somehow gotten the dates wrong? Was it possible I had miscalculated when Lily was conceived? The uncertainty crept in like poison, making me question everything I thought I knew about that night and our relationship. When Marcus stepped down from the witness stand, looking satisfied and vindicated, the courtroom felt like it was closing in on me. Elena was practically glowing with triumph, adjusting her pearls and smiling at her friends in the gallery like she had just won some kind of social victory. I could feel the weight of their certainty pressing down on me. My lawyer Janet leaned over and whispered, Sarah, are you absolutely certain about the dates? Because if there's any possibility you might be wrong, we need to discuss our options before we present the DNA results. Her concern was genuine, but it felt like another crack in my foundation. Even my own attorney was starting to doubt me. I closed my eyes and forced myself to remember that night clearly. Marcus showing up after 2 a.m., the way he held me like I was the only real thing in his world. The sunrise streaming through my bedroom window as we talked about our future. I'm not wrong, I whispered back. That night happened exactly the way I said it did. Judge Harrison called for a brief recess before the DNA results would be presented, and I used the time to step outside and call Mrs. Patterson to check on Lily. Hearing my daughter's voice on the phone, asking when I was coming home, reminded me why I was fighting this battle. This wasn't about me or Marcus or even Elena's opinion of me. This was about a little girl who deserved to know who her father was, and a father who needed to take responsibility for his actions. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Harrison looked more serious than he had all morning. Instead of immediately calling for the DNA results, he shuffled through a stack of papers that hadn't been there before. My heart started racing. This was clearly something new, something that had arrived during the recess.
Before we proceed with the DNA evidence,
Judge Harrison announced, his voice carrying a weight that made everyone in the room sit up straighter.
I need to address some additional documentation that has just been brought to my attention.
I looked at Janet, who appeared just as confused as I felt. We hadn't requested any additional evidence. Marcus's legal team looked equally surprised. David Kim was frantically whispering to Marcus, who went from confident to visibly nervous in the span of about 30 seconds.
In paternity cases, the judge continued, the court sometimes subpoenas additional records to ensure we have a complete picture of the circumstances in question. Phone records, digital communications, and other electronic evidence can provide crucial context for the testimony we've heard today.
That's when I noticed Marcus had gone completely pale. Not just nervous pale, but the kind of white that comes when someone realizes they're about to be caught in a lie. His hands were shaking as he reached for his water glass. Elena kept looking between her son and the judge, confusion growing by the second.
Your Honor.
David Kim stood up abruptly, his usual smooth demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic.
We weren't aware that digital records had been subpoenaed. We would like to request time to review any additional evidence before it's presented to the court.
Judge Harrison looked at him with the expression of someone who had dealt with too many lying defendants to be impressed by last-minute maneuvers.
Mr. Kim, these records were obtained through standard legal channels as part of the court's investigation into this matter. The defendant and his counsel will have the opportunity to respond after the evidence is presented.
I watched Marcus lean forward and whisper something urgent to his lawyer, but David Kim just shook his head helplessly. Whatever was in those phone records, Marcus knew it would destroy the story he'd carefully constructed, and there was nothing his expensive attorney could do to stop it. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted completely. Elena's triumphant smirk was gone, replaced by genuine concern as she watched her son's confidence crumble in real time. The friends she had brought to witness my humiliation were now leaning forward with the kind of curiosity that comes when you realize you're about to see something dramatic and unexpected. Judge Harrison held up a single sheet of paper. I could see printed text, though I couldn't make out the words from where I was sitting. We have here a text message sent from the defendant's phone at 2:47 a.m. on March 15, 2022, the judge said. The same night the plaintiff claims conception occurred. Marcus made a small sound, like he'd been punched in the stomach. David Kim began frantically shuffling through papers, searching for some way to object or delay what was clearly coming. I realized everything was about to change, and for the first time all morning, I felt a spark of hope that the truth was finally about to surface. Judge Harrison adjusted his reading glasses and looked directly at Marcus. The courtroom was so quiet, I could hear the air conditioning humming overhead. Elena had stopped fidgeting with her pearls and was staring at her son with a mixture of confusion and growing dread.
The text message reads as follows, Judge Harrison announced. Quote, just left Sarah's place. Mom can never find out I was here tonight. Delete this. End quote.
The message had been sent from the defendant's phone to a contact named Tyler Morrison at 2:47 a.m. on March 15, 2022. The explosion of sound that followed was immediate and chaotic. Elena gasped so loudly it echoed off the walls, her hand flying to her chest like she'd been physically struck. Marcus shot up from his chair, his face now red instead of pale, shaking his head frantically as he started to speak, until David Kim grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. "Your Honor, that's taken completely out of context," Marcus blurted, his voice higher than normal and trembling with panic. "That doesn't mean what it sounds like. I can explain everything." But Judge Harrison wasn't finished. He held up another sheet of paper, and I watched David Kim close his eyes like he was bracing for impact. There are several additional messages from that same evening and the following weeks that provide important context to this case. Elena was staring at Marcus with an expression I had never seen before. All her confidence and superiority had drained away, replaced by the horrified realization that her son had been lying to her for 3 years. "Marcus, what did you do?" she whispered, but he wouldn't look at her. Judge Harrison continued reading. March 16th, 1:32 p.m. "Tyler, if anyone asks, I was with you all weekend in Sacramento. We went to that conference together, remember?" March 20th, 11:45 p.m. "Dude, Sarah might be pregnant. If she tries to pin it on me, we stick to the story. I was never at her place that night." April 2nd, 8:23 a.m. "My mom is asking questions. Whatever you do, don't mention Sarah's name around her. She can never know I was there." Each message hit the courtroom like a bomb. I felt vindicated and sick at the same time, watching the man I had once loved reveal himself as someone I didn't recognize at all. The Marcus I thought I knew had been caring and honest. These messages showed someone calculating and manipulative, someone willing to destroy my reputation and deny his own child to protect himself. Marcus was on his feet again, and this time, David Kim couldn't stop him. "Your Honor, those messages were private communications taken out of context. They don't prove anything about paternity, and they certainly don't prove I was lying under oath." "Mr. Rivera," Judge Harrison said, his voice cutting through Marcus's protests like ice. "You just testified under oath that you were not with the plaintiff on March 15th, 2022, and that you were in Sacramento attending a conference. These messages directly contradict that testimony and establish a pattern of deliberate deception regarding your whereabouts and your relationship with the plaintiff." The judge then opened the manila envelope containing the DNA results. The paternity test results show, with 99.97% certainty, that Marcus Rivera is the biological father of Lily Chen. He looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Rivera, you are the father of the plaintiff's child, and you have committed perjury in my courtroom." Elena broke down completely then, not from shame, but from pure rage. She turned on Marcus with a fury I hadn't known she was capable of. "You lied to me for 3 years," she shouted. "I defended you. I called that poor girl terrible names because I believed you." Her voice rose higher as she continued. "I have friends here, Marcus. Do you understand what you've done to our reputation? To our family?" Marcus tried to approach her, but she threw up her hand to stop him. "Don't you dare touch me right now. That beautiful little girl has been without her father for 3 years because you were too much of a coward to tell the truth." Judge Harrison restored order to the courtroom and proceeded with his ruling. Marcus was ordered to pay full child support, retroactive to Lily's birth, covering 3 years of back payments that would finally allow me to catch up on bills and maybe even start saving for Lily's future. He was granted supervised visitation rights, but only after completing court-mandated parenting classes and counseling. David Kim made one final attempt to minimize the damage, arguing for reduced support payments and unsupervised visitation. Judge Harrison shut it down immediately. "Mr. Kim, your client has demonstrated a pattern of deception lasting 3 years. He will earn back trust through actions, not argument." As the hearing concluded, I felt a mixture of relief, vindication, and an unexpected sadness. I had won, but watching someone I once cared about reveal himself to be so fundamentally dishonest hurt in ways I hadn't anticipated. Walking out of that courtroom felt like stepping into a different world,
The same marble floors and echoing hallways that had intimidated me that morning now felt like a place where justice had actually been served. I carried the court orders in my purse, legal documents that finally validated everything I had been saying for 3 years. Lily would have her father's name on her birth certificate, and more importantly, she would have the financial support she deserved. The most unexpected moment came as I was gathering my things. Elena approached me, and for a split second, I braced myself for another confrontation. Instead, she stood there with tears streaming down her face and said something I never thought I would hear from her. "Sarah, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. I spent 3 years calling you horrible names, questioning your character, and treating you like you were trying to destroy my family. You were the only one telling the truth this whole time." Her voice shook as she continued. "I raised Marcus to be better than this. I taught him to take responsibility for his actions, to treat women with respect, and to never lie to his family. Watching him in that courtroom today, hearing those messages, I don't even recognize the man I raised." She paused, wiping her eyes with the tissue. "That little girl, my granddaughter, she deserves so much better from our family. From me." I didn't know how to respond at first. This woman had made my life hell for 3 years, had publicly questioned my integrity, and had turned her social circle against me. But looking at her now, broken and genuinely remorseful, I realized she had been as much a victim of Marcus's lies as I had. "Elena, you believed your son," I said quietly. "Any mother would have done the same." "No," she replied firmly. "I should have given you the benefit of the doubt. I should have demanded the truth from Marcus from the very beginning instead of helping him cover it up." She reached into her purse and handed me a business card. "I want to be part of Lily's life, if you'll let me. I want to make up for the grandmother I should have been from the start." Marcus tried to approach us then, but I raised my hand to stop him. The man who had just been exposed as a liar and a coward opened his mouth, probably to make excuses or try to soften what had just happened. I looked at him calmly and said the words I had been holding inside for 3 years. "Marcus, you had every opportunity to be a father to Lily. You could have stepped up when she was born. You could have been honest about that night. You could have been part of her life from the beginning. Instead, you chose to lie, to hide, and to let your mother attack me while you sat back and watched." His face crumpled as he tried to explain how scared he'd been, how overwhelming the pressure from his family had felt, how he wanted to make things right now. "I'm not interested in your excuses," I said. "You've had 3 years to step up. Now you'll do it because a judge ordered you to, not because you chose to. That difference matters." Picking Lily up from Mrs. Patterson's house that evening was one of the sweetest moments of my life. She ran toward me with her arms wide open, asking if I had good news like I promised. I knelt down and told her yes, Mommy had very good news, and that some things were going to be better for us now. She didn't need to know all the details yet, but she would grow up knowing her mother had fought for her and won. The child support payments meant I could finally afford better childcare, which opened the door for me to take evening classes toward my nursing degree. For the first time in 3 years, I could plan for the future instead of just surviving from paycheck to paycheck. Lily could have the clothes, toys, and opportunities every child deserves, and I could sleep at night knowing her college fund was growing instead of worrying about making rent. But the most important victory wasn't financial. I had proven to myself, to my daughter, and to a courtroom full of people that standing up for your truth matters, even when it feels like the whole world is against you. Lily would grow up knowing her mother never gave up, never backed down, and never stopped fighting for what was right. The lesson I learned from this experience is that sometimes the people with the most power, the most money, and the loudest voices are the ones with the most to hide. The truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it, and vindication feels even sweeter when you never stop believing in yourself. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it.
Leave a comment below about your own experiences standing up for the truth. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real stories about real people fighting real battles and winning against all odds.